Shalom, Israel. Most High Christ bless. I'm Captain Gaddy to my right.
Soldier Key said.
And you are tuned in to 15 Minutes with the Captains. All praise to the Most High. All right, so today's class is called Were the Native Americans Savages? Propaganda, they were savages. According to news history, our forefathers, the so-called Native American Indians, the so-called Hispanics, were savages. According to Pocahontas, ain't it Pocahontas? They made a song called Savages. So we gonna see through history and biblical text, were they savages? Give me Deuteronomy. We're gonna start off with Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 5.
The book of Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 5.
Go ahead.
Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it.
Go ahead.
Keep therefore and do them.
Watch this.
For this is your wisdom.
This is your what?
For this is your wisdom.
God says this will be our wisdom. Our forefathers were wise. Our forefathers were wise. Go ahead.
And your understanding.
And we understood many things, Rick.
In the sight of the nations.
And we're going to prove that these nations knew exactly who was over here in the so-called America. They knew exactly who was over here, and they knew or found out that these civilizations were some of the wisest people on the face of the planet. Read on.
Excuse me. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people.
Surely when we're keeping the commandments of God, we are a wise and understanding people. Come on.
For what nation is there so great?
What nation is there that's so great?
Who hath God so nigh unto them?
These what these nations are saying. That's why they try to keep us in sin. Because they know when we keep God's commandments as a nation, can't nobody step to us. Read on.
As the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for.
Read on.
And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day?
And what nation is there so great that has the statutes and judgments of the Lord? We are the greatest nation on the face of the planet. We are the smartest. We are the wisest. We are the strongest. We are the fastest. Every attribute of a human being is elevated when it comes to the Israelites, when it comes to the so-called Hispanics, so-called Native Indians, so-called blacks. But Esau say we were savages. We were walking around butt naked in the snow. We was living in doggone straw huts here in America. Well, we gonna find out. We gonna find out. Give me Hosea 4:17. So there was a time where we were living unrighteously. Hosea 4:17.
Hosea chapter 4, verse 17. Ephraim is joined to idols. Let him alone.
So God says Ephraim, which are the so-called Hispanics, the American Indians, God say Ephraim is joined to idols. And we still see that today. Even in today's time, we see that the so-called Hispanics, Native Americans joined to idols. Can we get that first video? Guadalupe.
Catholic Diocese of San Diego and Imperial Counties.
Yeah, more than 1,000 people came out for Our Lady of Guadalupe's procession led by one of Pope Francis's newest cardinals. CBS 8's Brian White was in North Park for the celebration.
Well, it's a magnificent, beautiful, beautiful day, and it's a wonderful time to celebrate the presence of all of the Hispanic communities.
Pope Francis installed San Diego Bishop Robert McElroy to the College of Cardinals back in August. Today, he led the annual procession to honor Our Lady of Guadalupe through the streets of North Park on this very special occasion, an event that's been held for over 50 years.
Our Lady of Guadalupe represents the presence of God in the Americas, and is a symbol that God was still with us, with the indigenous people, and with those who has come as immigrants and made us into one society.
More than 25 Guadalupana groups and ministries from parishes across the county partook in the procession to honor Mary, the patroness of the Americas, which included 3 dance troupes and more than 15 floats.
One faith is uniting us. That unity because of God, Jesus Christ, and Our Lady of Guadalupe is the one who brings us together. So they are coming from all over the places in Mexico, many states, and now we are here together, gathered because of her, because of Our Lady.
The rich and colorful procession began at the Mortley Field Sports Complex with dozens of traditional Aztec dancers leading the way down Upas Street.
This is very special to all of us. This is our mother, our Blessed Mother's Day, and we all come here together to celebrate her for the many, many favors she has done for us and miracles.
While people in Mexico and in the United States will celebrate the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe on December 12th with their own parishes, this procession is a chance for all to celebrate together as one.
Maria! Maria! All right, go to the next one. Go to the next one. All this idolatry, man. All this idolatry. And what we're going to come to learn through further in this class is that we became savages by following the white man. We became savages in America, savages in South America, savages by following the white man. We'll find out.
Santa Muerte is a Mexican folk saint who's commonly depicted as a skeletal figure carrying a globe, a scythe, and a scale. Santa Muerte has become widespread in Mexico and is becoming increasingly popular among Mexican immigrants in the United States. What's the story behind Santa Muerte? Where exactly did Santa Muerte come from? Who are her followers, and how did she become one of the most beloved and controversial saints in Mexican history? This video investigates the roots of Santa Muerte iconography and practice in pre-Hispanic, European, Mexican, and African cultures. Oral history interviews show that Santa Muerte is related to curanderismo, or healing, a role far distant from the brutality of narco culture. To learn more about Santa Muerte, stay tuned to the end of the video. The moniker Santa Muerte.
That's it. Get 2 Ezra 13 and verse 40. Because when the so-called Hispanic Native American Indians got to this side of the world, the plan was to keep God's commandments. That's why they left. The plan was to keep God's commandments over here. Watch this. Read.
2 Esdras chapter 13, verse 40.
Go ahead.
Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar the king of Assyria led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen.
Leave the multitude of the heathen, the other nations, go ahead.
And go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt.
Where never mankind dwelt. We're going to come to find out that Esau knew exactly where this land that never mankind dwelt. Watch this. Go ahead.
That they might there keep their statutes.
Keep what?
Keep their statutes.
Keep God's laws.
Which they never kept in their own land.
Remember, we read in Deuteronomy 4 that if you keep God's laws, you was going to be a great nation. You was going to be a nation of wisdom, a nation of understanding. All the nations would say, what nation is there so great that have statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which was set before us this day? So northern kingdom came over to keep God's commandments. Right? God says you keep my commandments, I'm going to put you above high. So you telling me when Esau got over here, we was butt naked running around in snow? Butt naked chasing buffalo? Savages? No way. We're going to prove that too. Keep going.
Verse 43. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river.
Come on.
For the Most High then shewed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over.
Read.
For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years. And the same region is called Arsareth.
Arsareth means newfound land, which Christopher Columbus used to identify America as Arsareth. That means they knew where we were. Let's get the book. Let's get the book. So this book is The Origins of the American Indians by Lee E. Humbleston. Hope I said that correctly. Lee E. Humbleston. Page 87, right?
Yes, sir.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
The Issachar variant was also accepted by Antonio Vasquez de Espinosa in his Compendio, 1630. Generally, Vasquez, 1948, argument concerning the possible ways the first settlers could have come to America paralleled Acosta's, but his conclusion owes nothing to Acosta.
Read on, read quick.
I say that the first settlers of the Indies descended from La Mejor Gente
Watch this.
then existing in the world. That is, from the 10 tribes of Israel.
From what?
From the 10 tribes of Israel.
So they knew this. Keep going.
When King Salmanassar exiled them to uninhabited lands, and in particular from the tribe of Issachar.
From the tribe of Issachar. Go down to Vasquez used.
Vasquez used the lost tribes theory to buttress his Issachar theory with a degree of confusion resulting. Vasquez used the Esdras story of the migration of the 10 lost tribes to show how the descendants of Issachar, who were among the exiles,
Watch this.
could have got to America.
Could have got to America. So they knew. They knew exactly who was over here. Keep going.
An event he dated at 739 BC. Yet Vasquez continued with a discussion of the evidence of an Orpherean origin which might have brought men to the New World in 1943 BC. He did not explain the connection of Issachar with the Ophirites and seemed to be offering an alternative to the Issachar origin.
Go to the next page. Go to page 88. And we're going to read at He Remained.
Sir. He remained convinced that the most reasonable theory seems to be that they are descended from the 10 tribes, especially the tribe of Issachar.
Go ahead.
This descent was indicated by many of the customs.
Many of the customs,
rites,
and
ceremonies common to the ancient Hebrews and modern Indians.
Go ahead, watch this.
The examples which Vasquez introduced were typical. Similarity in physique and temperament, circumcision, burial customs, language.
That don't sound like savages to me. That sound like a wise people who knew what they were doing. That sound like a people who knew God's statutes and were still trying to keep them. Go ahead.
He did not place much faith in the presumed equivalence of Peru and Ophir, nor did he think the easy metamorphosis of Indio into Udio by inverting the N carried any significance.
Jump down to the Mexicans.
The Mexicans are originally of the 10 tribes captured by Salmanassar and of the family of Issachar, whom the Indians recognized as their special ancestor.
Who the Indians recognized. The Indians recognized Issachar as the special ancestor. Talk about in Mexico. Watch this. Go to Lost Tribes and Promised Lands. Go to The Lost Tribes and Promised Lands by Ronald Sanders. Gotta read quick. Page 363. Yep, 363. Go ahead.
Page 363. In September 1644, a Portuguese Marano named Antonio de Montezinos arrived in Amsterdam after having lived for some years in South America and proceeded to tell the leaders of the recently established Jewish community there a story that caused them to think of him as a latter-day Eldad the Danite.
The Danite. So go to the next page. Go to, just flip over. And you're going to start at Montezino's story. Just right under the highlight.
Montezino's story, unclear as to the circumstances of his incarceration, is equally unclear as to those of his release. But released he was, and he immediately went to Francisco. Revealing himself as a Jew, Montesinos proclaimed his conviction that Francisco's hidden people were of the same race as he. Would Francisco lead him to them? The two men were soon back in the rugged mountains in which Francisco had made his initial revelation, marching relentlessly for a week before they finally came to a halt.
So jump down to waving a banner.
Waving a banner high in the air, the Indian guide soon was greeted by a puff of smoke far beyond the other bank of the river in response to his signal. The two men waited. Eventually, a canoe appeared, bearing 3 men and a woman, all of them Indians, to the place where Francisco and Montesinos were standing at the water's edge. The woman got off and spoke to Francisco in an Indian tongue. That Montesinos could not understand.
Go ahead.
Although he could perceive that he was being identified in the conversation. She then turned to her male companions to explain the situation. Upon hearing her words, they rose, went over to Montesinos, and to his utter astonishment, said, Shema Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elohino, Adonai Ahad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Go ahead.
They had recited in Hebrew, the fundamental credo of Judaism.
So how these savages knew Hebrew, was able to recite the book of Deuteronomy in Hebrew. Keep going. A brief conversation.
A brief conversation then ensued in their common ancestral tongue, according to Montesinos, whose fluency in it is almost as perplexing to the reader of his narrative as is that of his 3 mysterious new companions. They told him that they were themselves of the tribe of Reuben.
They told them themselves that they were from the tribe of Reuben. Go ahead.
And that the tribe of Joseph.
And that Ephraim
lived on an island nearby.
Lived on the island nearby. This don't sound like no savages. Go ahead, real quick.
The day when they were at last to issue forth into the world was coming soon. They explained, but in the meantime, they could not allow visitors to cross over to them. They were willing to make an exception in the near future. However, on account of their need for education, for though they spoke Hebrew, they could not read or write it. Would Montesinos send them 12 bearded men to be their teachers?
That's bullcrap. There have been many stones found with Hebrew writing of the 10 Commandments. They couldn't read or write it. They was reading it and they was writing it on stones, on pyramids, on walls. They was communicating with each other. How you think they passed notes to each other throughout the country? They wasn't savages. I'm going to tell you how they became savages. Go to the next book real quick. The next book. Stolen Continents, page 70. Yep. Stolen Continents. Ronald Wright, page 70. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
At the beginning of the new year, officials used to come from Cusco with their quipas, by which it was known how many births there had been that year and how many deaths. And in these there were great truth and accuracy, without any fraud or deceit. In this way, the Inca and the governors knew which of the Indians were poor, which women had been widowed, and whether they could afford to pay their taxes. And in each head province there was a great number of storehouses full of supplies and provisions. And if there was no war, all these supplies were divided among the poor and widows, the old, the lame, the blind, and the crippled. It is no small sorrow to reflect that those Incas, even though they were heathens and idolaters,
that's what they were called by the Spaniards. Go ahead.
Knew how to keep such good order.
Wait a minute. Savages understood order? Go ahead.
And that we Christians.
We who?
We Christians.
Christianity, Catholicism, go ahead.
Have destroyed so many kingdoms.
Have destroyed so many kingdoms. They knew that. Go to Destruction of the Indies. Real quick. Destruction of the Indies, page 14. Yep, that's it. Page 14. They had great order. Hispaniola. Page 14. You good. No. That's 14. Go ahead. Yeah, it all began.
It all began with the Europeans taking native women and children both as servants and to satisfy their own base appetites.
Go ahead.
Then, not content with what the local people offered them of their own free will, and all offered as much as they could spare, they started taking for themselves the food the natives, they started taking for themselves the food the natives contrived to produce by the sweat of their brows, which was in all honesty little enough, since what a European will consume in a single day normally supports 3 native households of 10 persons, each for a whole month.
So they was eating the food in one day of what we would have for 10 people in a month.
Right.
That's how greedy and dog. That was it. They were the savages. Esau was the savages. But they like to flip it and say that the Native Americans and Hispanics so-called were savages. No, y'all was the savages. We were the wise people. We had ordinances. We had laws. We understood order. Go to the next page. Just right on over. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Or than many European children's games, and with their horses and swords and lances, the Spaniards easily fended them off.
So jump down to they slaughtered everyone. Should be the next highlight mark. Yep, go ahead.
They slaughtered anyone and everyone in their path, on occasion running through a mother and her baby with a single thrust of their sword.
They slaughtered mothers and children. Go ahead.
They spared no one.
Very quick.
Erecting especially wide gibbets on which they could string their victims up with their feet just off the ground and then burn them alive 13 at a time.
Go ahead.
In honor of our Savior and the 12 apostles. Or tied dry straw to their bodies and set fire to it. Some they chose to keep alive and simply cut their wrists, leaving their hands dangling, saying to them, "Take this letter," meaning that their sorry condition would act as a warning to those hiding in the hills. The way they normally dealt with the native leaders and nobles was to tie them to a kind of griddle consisting of sticks resting on pitchforks, driven into the ground, and then grill them over a slow fire.
So go to Jeremiah 17:4, real quick. So we wasn't savages. They were the savages. They murdered, slaughtered us by the wholesale for no reason. They understood we had laws, ceremonies, customs, languages. We understood who we were. We understood we were the Israelites. We understood we were from the tribe of Reuben, Issachar, Gad, Manasseh, Ephraim. We understood that. So how come now we don't? Jeremiah 17:4.
Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 4.
Go ahead.
And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee.
We discontinue from an heritage which God gave us. We still had a little dignity. But after that slaughtering of those savages, now we don't know who we are. Now we're scattered throughout the four corners of the world. All because I was sin, yes, we understand that. But don't label us savages when y'all were the biggest savages on the face of the planet. Baruch 4. Baruch chapter 4 and verse 25.
The book of Baruch chapter 4, verse 25.
Go ahead.
My children, suffer patiently the wrath that is come upon you from God.
Read.
For thine enemy hath persecuted thee.
Come on.
But shortly thou shalt see his destruction.
God says shortly we gonna see the destruction of our enemy. Read on.
And shalt tread upon his neck. My delicate ones have gone rough ways.
Come on.
And were taken away as a flock caught of the enemy.
We were taken away in captivity as a flock caught of the enemy. Go ahead.
Be of good comfort, O my children, and cry unto God.
And cry to the Most High. Come on.
For ye shall be remembered of him that brought these things upon you.
Go ahead.
For as it was your mind to go astray from God, so being returned.
So being returned. Come on.
Seek him 10 times more.
Seek the Lord 10 times more. We were not savages. Now we know who we are again. We are the 12 tribes of Israel. You so-called Hispanics and you so-called Native American Indians, you were never savages. The people that robbed and spoiled us, they were the savages. They still are to this day the savages. So the question is, were the Native Americans savages? Were the Hispanic savages? I say no. We're lost, yes, but we were not the savages that are displayed by this so-called white man. All right? So all praise to the Most High. I'm Captain Gad to my right.
Soldier Key said.
And this has been 15 Minutes with a Captain. Shalom.
What is a nation?
Nation is men leading by example. Nation is family. Nation is community. Nation is children with role models. Nation is unity. Nation is you.
And finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord. His word